I had the privilege of meeting a postpartum doula a few years back who made a very profound statement that always stuck with me. When she introduced herself and what it is that she did for work, she said, "Help is not help unless it is help." And I had to stop and think about that for a second. And the more I thought about it, the more important that statement became. If you are getting ready to have a baby, or you have just had a baby, or are thinking about a baby, you will not want to miss this conversation that I have with the Doula Darcy. Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an Eastern medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your menstrual health, offering period solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are, I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. I am so excited for today's conversation. I know you hear me say that like literally every episode, but I really am very excited, both personally and professionally, about this conversation. I am joined today by the Doula Darcy. Welcome, Darcy.
Thank you so much for having me. I am super excited too to chat with you.
So tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into the work that you do.
Oh, all right. So I, after college, got a job at an ad agency, and that's what I had kind of majored in, and that's where I thought my life was going, and I loved it, and it was great. And I worked in advertising for 10 years, and then I had a baby.
And that changes everything, doesn't it?
That changes literally everything. But for me, in addition to changing everything, it also changed my career because to make a very long story short, had a C-section and then an infection afterwards that had me back in the hospital. I was pretty sick and just tired, and had surgery and a baby. And it was the first time in my life that I had, not that I wasn't in control, I couldn't like work my way out of it. I couldn't, I was just a mess. As we were saying before we started recording, like it was kind of a shit show. Even though my husband was very supportive, my mother was there, who I have a great relationship with. My mother-in-law was there helping me, and I still was just kind of in my own mind alone and struggling with like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my body? I can't even give birth. Like my body failed. So that was the whole story I was telling myself. And then I had 2 more babies. I had 3 babies in 4 years, 3 C-sections in 4 years. So I was depleted, doesn't even begin to describe how I felt. But I was just like, well, this is motherhood. And so anyway, I, along that way, had quit my job in advertising due to some intrusive thoughts I was having from postpartum anxiety, and then had gotten a new job for the company called Zanga, who, if anyone had a Zanga blog back in like the year 2000. And so one day I was reading a blog about a postpartum doula, and I was like, hold the phone. What is this? Because this is what I want to do with my life now. And so I became obsessed with researching what a postpartum doula was and realizing that since I had had my daughter, that I was acting as a postpartum doula. I was calling all my friends who were having babies, or even like people I had known in high school but hadn't had any contact with. If I found that they were pregnant, I was like reaching out to them and being like, listen, it's going to be bad. And then just really having those deep and real conversations with moms I was meeting in the Dover area where I was living. And so when I saw this description of what a postpartum doula was, I was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. And then from there, very soon after, a postpartum doula training came along in Boston, which is about an hour from where we live. And I did my training, I got certified, and the rest is history. So I've been a postpartum doula now for 14 years. That was 14 years ago. And yeah, it's been great. Somewhere along the way, I met you.
Yes. Yes, in the birth community,
Yeah.
because I'm really passionate about healthy and empowered birthing, healthy and empowered recovery afterwards, and that was how our paths crossed initially.
Mm.
I have admired Darcy's work from afar and up close, honestly, because we travel in similar circles. But I really wanted to have Darcy on the program today and have a conversation today about what doulas are, what they do. Honestly, they really are angels among us. And
Mhm.
collectively, there's a lack of information about what this amazing profession is, what it does, and the incredibly important role that it serves in people's recovery process after they give birth. So, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about what a doula is and the differences between a birth doula and a postpartum doula.
Absolutely. This is my favorite thing to talk about. So, a lot of people have heard or have like a rough idea, or when they hear the word doula, they think of birth doulas. And birth doulas support women throughout pregnancy and labor and delivery. And they're non medical providers, but that are very educated about birth, pregnancy, and the early postpartum days. So, they'll be with you at your birth, which is amazing. Postpartum doulas pick up where birth doulas leave off and help women in their homes, if they give birth at home or if they give birth at the hospital, once they're home with their babies, providing physical support, emotional support, informational support, and again, in a non-medical role. But the best description I've heard actually was from the woman who trained me, and she said, postpartum doulas are the women of the village helping the women of the village. Yes, it's a yeah. And so yes, it's a profession now and a job and a career, but throughout history, it just was weaved into our society. And it just isn't anymore. Hence the reason that it's a career now. But, throughout time, if someone was having a baby, the women of the village came around and supported that family. They needed that baby to survive. So they cared for other children. They brought the mother food. They brought the family food. They, helped make sure this baby breastfed and, all the things. And even, in a more recent history in the US, even in the 50s and the 60s, there were more stay-at-home moms. So, even if you didn't necessarily have someone helping you every day, you had like the women of the neighborhood bringing you casseroles or coming over and just having coffee and bringing their kids and all sitting around chatting. And now most women have a baby and are sent home in isolation, complete isolation. And a lot of them and I remember feeling this way. I'd never been in my house before. For, all day, every day for a week at a time.
Yeah.
And having a baby to care for. So it's a huge transition. So having another woman there who has knowledge and experience and very often, done this before themselves can be a complete and total game changer. So postpartum doulas, we can answer your questions about the recovery from birth, whether it's a vaginal birth, cesarean birth. We can answer questions about newborn care and then, what's going on with your baby, everything from the umbilical cord to, I always say the bazillion questions you can't even imagine that you're going to have when you're pregnant, but the bazillion questions you have once your baby's here. And then helping with feeding, answering all those questions. But then also, we're looking at the whole family. So helping with making sure parents are staying hydrated, parents are eating good, healthy food and not surviving on just granola bars and chips. And then also tackling laundry, dishes, tidying up, just keeping the household running, caring for older siblings, whatever needs to happen that day to help. What I always say is to help mom enjoy this the most and, heal, rest, recover, and bond with her new baby.
I love that. And I talk to my clients about the importance of having this kind of support when I'm doing labor preparation with them. I start weaving it into the conversation when I'm talking with clients when they're in their fertility journey, when they're working on trying to get pregnant. But a lot of people don't realize until they've given birth and they go home with this little person, or they're at home with this little person and they go, oh, wow, that's what she's talking about.
Yes. Well, and I feel it's such a common phenomenon, and I 100% did this when I had my daughter. I thought like birth was the big thing that I had to prepare for. I made a baby registry for some stuff that my friends told me I needed that I didn't end up using. And I read a lot of books about birth. And then she was here, and I remember just holding her and being like, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I didn't prepare for this at all. And I hear that over and over and over again with my clients. And that's another piece of the role of a postpartum doula is it used to also be weaved into our society that we just grew up watching our mothers and our aunts and our cousins have babies and feed those babies and care for those babies. And we just learned, we saw breastfeeding, we saw diaper changes, we saw all these things. And now so many women have a baby and they've never held a baby before, never mind seen anyone breastfeed or talked to anybody about, the first couple weeks of caring for a newborn. So it's like we're going into this whole situation completely blind. So having a trusted professional there alongside you. And I always say hiring a postpartum doula is like having your mom there without the baggage.
I love that. I love that.
We don't come in with pushing a certain parenting style or just blabbering on with advice. So many, once you have a baby, so many family members are well-meaning coming in and saying, well, here's what I did. Here's what worked for me. Here's what you should, you should do this. You should do this. You should. And they're trying to be helpful more often than not. But in that vulnerable state after you've just given birth, we can often hear that as criticism, or we're in that postpartum fog and haze. Your mom tells you one thing, your best friend tells you another, the nurse at the hospital said this, and it's like you can't even make heads or tails of what the heck you should be doing. So postpartum doulas can really help you navigate all that, offer some evidence-based information and, advice if you ask for it. But we're really there to help parents come up with their own parenting style, not, well, here's what worked for me 30 years ago and you were fine.
Yeah.
The other thing is a lot of times for family and friends who visit, they want to just hold the baby and talk to you. And I always say that's a nap that you just missed.
Yes.
In those first weeks. And
That's
you
so
should
true.
not be spending that time entertaining guests, getting them coffee, getting them drinks, making small chat while they hold the baby. Postpartum doulas come in and do the opposite. I mean, certainly talking and chatting and listening if that's what you need that day. But a lot of times it's the handing the baby over to the doula so that you can go nap or shower or eat a sandwich with both hands, whatever. I always say, when you hire a postpartum doula, what we do every day looks different. It's different every day, and it's based on what you need in that moment. I walk through the door and I kind of can scan the room. Is everything put away, or is there laundry everywhere, empty dishes, and I always ask the mom, what do you need the most right now? And it's usually food, sleep, a cry, or just debriefing, telling their birth story. That's another huge piece.
Yeah.
And so then we just kind of take it from there. And then as the weeks go by, what we do really starts to shift and change as everybody's recovering and getting more sleep and feeding is going well and all those things. So I think it's the best job in the world.
I think it's one of the most important ones, honestly, because it's so critical for infant mother bonding, for mother's recovery, because, you know, I see huge numbers of people who struggle with secondary infertility. They struggle with health problems long after their birth, and it's because they didn't have the help that they needed to properly recover during that really tender period. So if you've been following the show for a little while, in season 2, at the beginning of season 2, I talked through how postpartum is one of your golden opportunities to hit a reset button on your health. And every time you are postpartum, whether that is full term or that is through pregnancy loss, you have an opportunity to make major changes and exponential healing in things that have showed up in your body and to recover after this pregnancy experience. And we are at our most empty and depleted when we are in postpartum. You have just literally taken all of the fabric of your entire body over the course of almost 10 months to bring this little miracle into the world. Now, if you're choosing to breastfeed, you are also continuing to put these resources into making sure that your infant survives, right? So mom has to have things poured back into her cup. And one of the reasons that I was just so excited that Darcy agreed to do this interview today is I, like Darcy, had a very similar postpartum recovery experience with my daughter 13 years ago. My mom did what she could, but she was working full time. My partner was working full time, marginally engaged. I had well-intentioned family come stay for 3 weeks and expect me to cook and clean and do the laundry while I was in my recovery phase. And then for some reason, I couldn't figure out why when I stopped nursing, I bled for months on end. And it contributed to secondary infertility for me. So this is a really critical, tender period for mom and baby bonding, for the health of mom and baby, and for whatever you choose to do in the future, whether that is grow your family, whether that's being able to just reintegrate yourself into life in a healthy way. Like, this is such a fundamentally important time in a woman's life to rebuild the fabric that she's made of. And, you know, do you have people that run around and feel like they need to clean before you arrive?
Oh my gosh, yes. And so that's actually like on my checklist when I do an intake with a new client. I actually like say the postpartum doula is not someone that you clean the house for. We fully expect to arrive to a messy house, unshowered parents, and just, you know, and I always say, I've been a postpartum doula for 14 years. I have 3 kids. I have seen it all. Nothing that you can say or do is going to shock me. And I think that's some of the most profound experiences I've had as a postpartum doula, particularly when I was just starting. Because for me, sleep, I was so sleep deprived. As I mentioned, I had 3 babies, 3 C-sections in 4 years. I was exhausted. So it was like my world revolved around sleep. If my mom could come over, I was like, here, I got to go lay down. And I just daydreamed about ways that I could lay down. So when I first became a postpartum doula, that was my big focus was, you know, and lots of moms were like, no, I don't need to lay down. I don't need to rest. I feel fine. And that, you know, sleep is so important and so fundamental to what a postpartum doula does. But also what I have found that most new moms need from their postpartum doula the most is just reassurance that they're doing a good job. And that everything is normal. And I can see it on my clients' faces when they're, you know, telling me about the triple feeding that they're breastfeeding and then they're pumping and then they're bottle feeding or they're doing this or the baby made this noise and what does that mean? And And I listen to it all. And, you know, sometimes it's 1 minute, sometimes it's 2 hours of them talking. And then to just say to them, this is all normal. You know, because we have no frame of reference of babies and the postpartum time period, we don't even know if something's majorly wrong or not. So when your postpartum doula comes and says, no, this is all normal, like, yeah, dirty diapers everywhere, dishes piled up in the sink, your baby won't stop crying unless you hold him, like, this is normal. I see this all the time. It's kind of like doulas and midwives who sit on their hands during labor. You know, they're not rushing around. They're not acting like it's an emergency. I remember being in labor and being like, and everybody was just sitting around. I'm like, what? I remember feeling like, oh, if they're not worried, I won't be worried. You know, it kept me relaxed. So postpartum doulas, it's the same thing. Like in the chaos of the newborn time, when you feel like your world is spiraling out of control, when a postpartum doula shows up and is just smiling, chit-chatting, you know, oh, this is all fine. This is all normal. You're doing a great job, mom. That can completely change. And I always say the years I struggled with sleep deprivation, postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, if someone had just come in and been like, you're doing fine, this is normal, it would have majorly changed the trajectory of my life at that point. And I think it's kind of an overlooked part of the impact that a postpartum doula can have. That reassurance that everything's okay. And, you know, another piece of that is like, there have been moments where I'm like, you know what, this, you know, color in the diaper or this, you know, umbilical cord. Look, doulas aren't medical, but I always say we know what's normal. Mm-hmm. We know what's worth a call to the pediatrician. We know what is worth a call back to your OB or midwife. Mm-hmm. But 9 times out of 10, everything's normal and fine. But it's so nice to have that in your home. And I always say, and to not have to rely on Googling things. That
Dr. Google's scary.
Right. Never ends well. You know, to have a professional in your home that can just be like, yep, that looks good. That, you know, maybe try this over here. You know, it's the best. And like you said, I think everybody needs a postpartum doula.
Oh my gosh, yes. Hands down. If you're going to make any investment in anything, like we spend so much of our time and attention on the shower and sprinkling the baby with all of these things that, like, you know, clothes that are just so cute, but they're going to last like maybe 5 minutes and they might not even be something the baby wears depending on how big they are at birth. Like we just are so focused on that stuff. And we lose sight of how badly mom needs to be held afterwards in all of the ways. I love what you were saying about like sometimes the conversation is just a few minutes and she needs to sleep. Sometimes it's holding space for her heartfelt, vulnerable outpouring of her birth story. Like this is so important. This is part of what we used to do in community. And receiving is the most feminine energy there is. And when you have birthed a baby, you are in your most feminine energy at that point and being held and seen and not chastised or judged or criticized or feel those things based on what people are telling you. Because it isn't always directed that way. It's how it's perceived. But feeling held and seen and heard. These are themes that affect women's health all the way through, but are so deeply impactful during these tender healing stages at the beginning. And I think it's one of the most beautiful things of having a postpartum professional come into your home and be able to hold that space for you.
Yeah.
Are you interested in sound healing and wish to use it for self-care in the comfort of your own home? Join me for Relax and Restore, a sound healing course to ground, relax, and support your body. In today's world, we are pulled in too many directions, feeling overwhelmed and overscheduled much of the time. What if you had a quick and easy way to help your body relax when experiencing anxiety and maybe just unwind at the end of a crazy day? Join me for the upcoming Relax and Restore class offered both in person in my office in Dover, New Hampshire, and online through Zoom, and learn how you can use sound to relax and nourish your overtaxed system and feel replenished to take on another day. Details about the upcoming class are available in the show notes. And now, back to the show.
And there's a famous quote, who I can't remember who said it, unfortunately, but it's something about how a woman never forgets how she was made to feel during her birth. And I think that extends into post. You might forget the details, but you always remember how you were made to feel. And if you're trying to share your birth story and people are, oh, this could be a whole other conversation.
Maybe we should do it.
You know, one thing for me was I had a C-section. So it wasn't an emergency C-section, but it was a C-section. And everybody said to me, oh, well, at least the baby's healthy. But you're here and you're both healthy. Even my doctor said to me, 100 years ago, you both would have died. But, here you are. You're both healthy. And
wow.
And that's one of those things, like you said, she was trying to make me feel better. I think she was trying to make me feel like that the C-section was definitely necessary, but it's kind of that thing like, don't talk about what happened, or the underlying thing is don't complain about what happened to you. It's like the only acceptable thing for you to say is to be grateful that your baby is healthy and that you didn't die. And anything else is just, if you start to say something that people come at you with well, at least she's here, she's healthy, and you're fine now, and it's all good, and that's in the past. And it's like, let's brush that under the rug. But it is so necessary and important to talk through that experience, trauma, and the good, the bad, and the ugly, and both of it. Like, yes, obviously you're grateful that you survived and that your baby is healthy. And you're a little pissed that you didn't know more or didn't advocate, or that, this happened, or, you wish it went a different way, or that it was traumatic when this doctor said this or did this with your leg or whatever. Feeling through all of that, talking through all of that is so necessary. And without anyone shooting you, cutting you off, or, so postpartum doulas are trained to truly listen and reflect back to the mom, what they've heard and seen. And like you said, that is just something that is so important. Like, it has lifelong importance.
It does.
For sure.
It absolutely does. It's funny how different events in your life lead you to doing the things that you do later on. And one of the pieces of literature that I did in my master's degree, so this was long before I had my daughter, was about birth stories. It was a collection of birth stories, and how critically important, because my master's is in communication, it is for those stories to live outside of the body. And that this was part of the rite of passage in many cultures earlier on, right? When we used to live more in community and hold this kind of space in community, and how isolating, like you mentioned before, it is when we don't have an opportunity to share these stories. And then I see it from what I do as a holistic women's health practitioner later on in their life. It mastitizes its energy, and that we hold usually in our reproductive system, right? And it manifests itself as disharmonies later on, because this energy really does need to move. We do need to be heard. And collectively, women haven't been in a space where they're seen and heard and held in a safe way to have their voices expressed. Like, if you think about things historically, like if you were one of these birth keepers, or you were an herbal wisdom keeper or something like that, you were ostracized. In some cases, you were killed. There's a really dark history to some of this work. And it does end up playing forward in terms of ancestral lineage, right? Like what our bodies remember. So we don't always
Mhm.
feel like we can share these stories. And then when we get shut down trying to share these stories, it just further creates a bigger snowball. So I
Mhm.
think that it's so beautiful that one of the things that a postpartum doula does is hold space
Mhm.
for that birth story to be shared.
Oh, yeah. It's a big, big thing. And I started to say before when I was first starting out, I was in my head focused on like, okay, I have to make this mom a sandwich to make sure she gets a nap. I got to throw in a load of laundry. There's dirty dishes. I want to run the dishwasher. But some days, some moms, sometimes the best thing I could do was spend a 3-hour shift sitting on her couch, just listening. I mean, yes, it's part of our training, but also it's very weird to think I'm getting paid. And it's like, I'm not doing anything. I'm not, and this is like the American, your worth is what you produce. I was like, how can I get paid, you know, for just sitting here, listening to her talk? I didn't accomplish anything. And yet, at the end of the shift, the mom is lighter,
Mhm.
smiling. She's happily writing me a check. There's no question in her mind that this was a well spent time or whatever. So that's been really neat for me over my 14-year career to kind of, in the beginning, I was very much do, 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 do.
Mhm.
And now I'm much more, oh, the dishes, that'll happen. But let's sit here and talk and listen. And, that's kind of shifted for me as the most important thing. And if you really think about it, you're not doing that with anyone else.
Mhm.
Even, maybe your best friends, but oftentimes what I see happen is just the way, for every reason you just said, even with your dear friends, you start telling your own birth story. It's like you can't shut these other
Mhm.
people up. Everybody's desperate to share their story. I think that's a little piece of what, doulas always talk, and I'm sure you've heard this too, Adrian, but like once somebody's pregnant, when you go out, it's like everybody's telling you their horror story.
Yes.
And, we're like, okay, everybody stop. But I think it's these women trying to process what happened to them
Mhm.
and in a way save someone, but it's not helping that pregnant mom. But it speaks to this need that we all have to talk about what happened to us
Mm.
and
Absolutely.
share.
Well, I mean, and
Uh,
pregnancy in and of itself, like, can be a little bit of an isolating experience because if you aren't in community with other women who are going through it, and even just being in the confines of your own family unit, like, this can be an entirely new experience because you're so focused on all of the changes that are happening rapid fire inside of your
mm,
body. And then you've gone through this birthing experience and they have an external perception and experience with it, but you went through physical changes, emotional changes, spiritual changes. Like
mhm,
when you become a mom for the first time, it's that crossing from maidenhood into matrescence. And like, this is a completely new stage of your life. You are a new person. And every time you give birth, you are a different person than you were prior to that birth. And it's a
mhm,
beautiful thing, but we don't acknowledge it. And sometimes it can make us feel like a stranger in our own body.
mhm,
Sometimes it can make us feel like a stranger to other people in the world around us. And everything that happens inside of your body when you aren't with others that can identify with that, that can be a very isolating experience. So, not only having that space held, but also by somebody who might have shared experience with you is a very powerful position to be in for healing.
absolutely. And I think we need more of it in our society for sure. And, you mentioned before, like the postpartum is such a chance for immense healing for our lifetime. And that in so many other cultures, that those first 40 days after a baby's
Mhm.
born, there's just cultural traditions that are just the norm,
Mhm.
and certain foods and certain days spent in the bed and, keeping everybody warm. And, in India, it's just accepted that the woman who just had a baby, her mother is coming for 40 days. No ifs, ands, buts about it. There's a 40-day period. And that 40 days kind of crosses into a lot of different cultures. And we just don't have that here. We have, you get 6 weeks, 2 weeks of time off from work, but
of unpaid leave.
Yeah, right.
That's another soapbox I could stand on.
Right.
Let's talk about the financial burden of all of this and the stress that adds.
Right. Yes. But another thing, and you probably are the best person to ask this, I've been seeing a lot lately about the correlation between how you care for yourself postpartum and the impact that has as you start to perimenopause.
Oh,
And
I'm
menopause.
so glad you made that connection.
Yes. Good. So, that's something I've just been learning about recently and kind of as I'm starting perimenopause. And I just think it's fascinating and it makes sense.
It is. It's huge. It's huge. And how we care for ourselves in the postpartum, because you can experience postnatal depletion up to 10 years after you give birth if you're not intentional and mindful and very supported. And when I say supported, that's food, that's rest, that's all of these things, right? Emotional support. If you're not really well supported in the postpartum, you don't properly heal. And it does affect the health of future babies. But I love that you just made this connection, especially because I'm on this whole perimenopausal kick right now with classes I'm teaching for clients and really the influx of people that I'm seeing coming into my practice right now that are going, dear God, what is happening to my body? I feel like I'm living on an emotional roller coaster. Am I insane? And I'm like, no, you're not. This is what's happening and this is why. And I teach a class called Coming into Second Spring specifically because of that. But it is the fact that we're not properly healing and replenishing after birth during this very critical moment. So postpartum is the second of our 3 golden opportunities to hit a reset button on our health. The first is when we start our periods. And most of us don't know that at the time, or we're a stubborn teenager and we don't want to listen to what our parents are telling us. I'm living that right now. The second is postpartum. And the third is when you're going through your menopausal transition. And it literally sets the tone for how you are able to, the vitality that you have move through the second spring of your life. You are coming out of your birthing and bleeding years, and you are starting a completely new energetic chapter in your life. It's usually a lot more extroverted because we're more home and hearth during our childbearing years. We're more focused on family. So when we heal well and are supported during that postpartum period of our life, we have a lot gentler experience with perimenopause and our menopausal transition because we're not going into it phenomenally depleted. Because the other thing that also taxes, and I could do a whole episode on this, maybe I should, is that we also are expected to maintain a pace of life that doesn't work with the fact that we're cyclical beings. And so when we're living at that screech mode all the time, we're taking that depletion that we're getting postpartum and now, I'm going to raise you. And it makes it that much more difficult to rebuild, replenish, and actually prepare for that transition. So when we don't accept the energetic invitation to slow down at 35, by the time we begin this journey right around 42, our bodies are like, wow, I feel like I live on a roller coaster and my cycle is all over the place and I can't sleep and I have send help. I'm waving a flag, right?
Yeah.
So postpartum recovery is critically important for not only your health and the way you can show up for your baby now, but how your body's going to show up for you in 10 years or more, depending on how old you are when you have your last baby.
Yeah. And so that just speaks to what I've been saying a lot lately now to the doulas that I'm working with. Now I'm doing a lot of doula business coaching and marketing strategy, but doula work is so tough It's hard to keep it sustainable. So that's what I'm trying to help doulas do. And the reason I want doula work to be sustainable is that the impact doulas have is on a generational level.
Mm-hmm.
And for all the reasons you just said, but also that huge emotional and spiritual transition you're going through postpartum, that affects the baby, not only you. I mean, you're establishing your relationship with your baby, you're creating a physically safe environment for your baby, but also, regulating your nervous system, their nervous system. There is so much going on.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're coming at all of that feeling depleted, not safe, not well cared for, it affects all of it. And what I love is that they're really starting to study all of this, but I don't know. I just think that the world needs more doulas. The world needs more doulas who are working, for longer and not burning out, not letting their experience and knowledge leave the world because they're tired and needing to take care of themselves. So I am going to just add all this information about menopause into my spiel.
Well, I'm happy to talk offline with you about it if
yes.
you would like, because
Yeah.
it is, when I was talking about that intergenerational trauma that we carry,
Yes.
it's
Oh, yeah.
totally part of it. Like
Mhm.
being able to regulate your own nervous system, your baby feels that. You have a resonant field around your body. And when you're holding your
Mhm.
baby and you're all stressed out, you're winding them up too.
Yes. Right.
And so what you said is so, so important. And that really important piece that I feel like, I had mentioned the 6 weeks with no paid leave kind of thing. Like this is where, if you're going to budget for anything,
Yes.
budget for a postpartum doula, because you won't realize just how deeply you need them until you're in it. Because I've had many clients come to me afterwards that did not opt to do postpartum care with me and then reach out and go, can we do something like appointment by appointment? Because I don't know what's happening right now, and my heart breaks whenever I get those calls, because you can prepare people and tell them these things ahead of time. And it isn't until they're in it and they're literally suffering and they feel like they're drowning that they go, oh, I really do need that. But now how am I going to make this happen financially?
Right.
Like this is something that should be on your registry and people should be putting money into in order to care for both you and baby afterwards. And the sad part is when people look at registries, they typically buy for the baby and they don't even look at what mom needs.
Yeah. So I think the rebellion that your listeners can take or make is that I love the idea of registering for support, not stuff. There's really, registries are, like you said, are all about the baby, are all about stuff. And if you really think about it, the whole registry industry, which is a $12 billion industry every year, is fueled by the people who make the stuff. They have massive marketing campaigns about the stuff that they make, the strollers, whatever. The list goes on and on and on. And yes, you need some stuff, but you mostly need support. And that's doula support, that's lactation support, that's steaming, that's massage, that's acupuncture, all meal prep, house cleaning. So if you can rebel against that corporate baby registry industry and register for support, not stuff. And that's just a little plug for Be Her Village, which is a website where you can create a registry online for support, not stuff. And they make it super easy. It's just, I think that's another really great way you can set yourself up financially for a good pregnancy and birth and postpartum experience.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I think we might have to do a part 2, Darcy, about this birth story aspect, because I love this piece. But if people are looking for you, whether you are a doula who's listening and going, oh, she does business coaching, I want to know more about that to make this business sustainable.
Yeah.
Or if you are in the Seacoast area of Maine and New Hampshire and you are looking for postpartum doula support, how can people find you, Darcy?
So if you are in the Seacoast area, go to doverdoula.com. That's our website for our postpartum doula support and lactation counseling support. And then if you're a doula looking for support, head to the Doula Darcy. And I have lots of just self-paced online classes. I have a membership program and then one-on-one coaching as well. And then I love Instagram. So find me also on Instagram at Dover Doula or at the Doula Darcy. Shoot me a DM and I could chat about this all day. So book me for another podcast. Let's do it. Because I feel like we just scratched the surface.
Oh gosh, yes. I agree. I agree. Well, thank you again so much for joining me and having this incredibly important conversation, Darcy. And we will absolutely schedule a part 2, guys.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much for having me. This was so great.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and acutonics practitioner, herbalist, and Chinese nutritional therapist Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like and follow us at Moon Essence Me on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.